Hello and welcome to another episode of Metal Effort. My name's Nehemiah, and today we're going to be looking at this piece of metal, the Kizer Begleiter. Don't know how to say that. Let's just go with that. Let's jump into our size comparisons. We've got our PM2, we've got our Para 3, and as you can see here, it's a medium-sized knife. It's about the same length as the PM2 from front to back. A little over 3.5 inch in the blade area, so a little bit longer than the PM2, but overall about the same size. So good medium-sized knife. This knife is on loan from one of my viewers, Sean. He's also SF Knife Guy on Instagram if you want to give him a follow. He also loaned me the Spyderco Coochie, so thank you for the loans. Help the channel out. I appreciate it. Let's do a weigh-in. This is a full titanium version of a budget model that this designer has made in the past. So for titanium, let's call it 9 ounces. It's pretty good for this size of knife. It's definitely really good in the weight department. And we'll talk about that later as well. First thing we want to talk about is this Tonto blade. Now, I'm not the biggest Tonto blade shape fan in the world, so I'll just kind of acknowledge that up front. But I think, this is okay. There's definitely a time where you might want something this stabby, and so it doesn't hurt to have a Tonto in your collection, I suppose. Blade shape is, very classically Tonto. The one thing I will say is that the depth at which the slope goes, it's almost at like a 45-degree angle, so it's a little bit longer of a sweep than some Tontos. Some Tontos are a little bit shorter in the angle where it actually starts to clip up. So, I don't know. I just want to point that out. It's a little bit pointier than most. It is a hollow grind, so you can see the line right here. I don't know if that reflection is getting in the way, but you can see how heavily this is hollowed out. So it's a pretty slicey blade for sure. You're already starting with pretty thin blade stock. We can get a measurement in there for objective sake. So 0.12 thick and then hollow on top of that. This is extremely thinly ground. Very good slicer. I would say that's the biggest positive about the blade is just its cutting power. Both stabbing and slicing seems to be pretty good. So good job there. Next thing, and I guess this could be the neutral, but I'll give it a shout out here. I'm usually not a fan of Kizer's placement for their billboarding. They have a lot of information on here. You have their crazy model number here. You've got the steel stamp. You've got the designer on the back. I'm giving them style points here simply because they moved it up off the main blade. I feel like normally they just would have plastered it right across the cutting edge, and that's really annoying to me. I don't like the extra friction from the etch. It looks terrible. So this is okay. It's better. I'd rather just nothing except for the steel type, but I don't think we're going to get that out of Kizer. So this is a step in the right direction, so I want to give them the benefit of the doubt. As far as the weight's concerned, this is extremely heavily milled out. You can see the internal milling, obviously, but even external milling, like kind of the machining that they're doing here along the edge. At first, I thought this stuff was pretty ornamental, just kind of flashy. But, I mean, you're taking material out, so that is going to help the weight out. So I don't think it's completely superfluous. This is both internal and external milling, basically helping on the weight of it. It's a very balanced blade for the most part. Super duper lightweight. A full ounce lighter almost than the PM2, just to give you an idea of the perspective difference on the weight. So good job there. I think, having titanium and lightweight knives is kind of a nicety. The clip on this is good. It's decent. It's relatively deep. It's not like super duper deep, but the screws are going horizontal instead of vertical, which I think would have pushed the clip down a little bit. You're not going to get any movements since you have 2 screws to kind of pin it down. So I don't foresee this, wrenching out of position very easily. Pretty well chamfered, plenty of ramp to get in there, plenty of spring. As far as like a 3D milled clip, I think this is pretty good. So props there. Next thing is the lanyard hole. Lanyard hole is pretty big, so it definitely does like draw your eye to it. It's in an okay spot though. The clip is higher than the lanyard hole, so usually that's my like go-to decision breaker on whether or not this is a good thing or a bad thing. If they put the clip lower than the lanyard hole, I'd be rioting in the streets. Um, so yeah, it's okay. It's fine. Definitely gonna fit your rope size lanyard holes if that's what you're concerned with. As far as the ergos go, you know, this is definitely adequate. It's, I think, big enough that it's gonna fit most hand sizes. I'm medium size in hand, and it fits okay. It's good. I think space wise, you're all right. The thinness of the knife and kind of the blockiness, like these aren't, I wouldn't call them hot spots, but like warm spots just kind of all over the knife. It just has like an uneven angular feel to it subtly. It's not really bad. Nothing really is egregious. It's just kind of uninviting a little bit. But, you know, this design isn't something that's going to, you know, be really negative for anybody. I don't think this is going to be just downright uncomfortable for anyone. And so because it's big enough to fit in most hands and it's, you know, mild enough not to annoy anybody, I'm going to put it in the decent. Definitely somewhere in the average range overall. Another nice thing, and I don't always point this out, but I will here. I think for something this budget, it's kind of nice. So titanium frame, you have S35 steel, which is good. They've managed to do an internal stop pin. So with just the two barrel spacers in the back, it's a very free and open knife in the back, which obviously contributes to how lightweight it is, but also be really easy to sweep a Q-tip in there to clean gunk out if you needed to. It's very, very easy, open design to take apart, clean, and even if you don't want to take it apart, clean it just from the back. Last decent thing I want to talk about is the value. This is coming in at $169. It's kind of in a weird spot just because it's like a premium budget knife. There's like a budget version of this knife that came out first, and so this is kind of just a souped up budget version. And I think it's good. You know, it's definitely a solid knife, and we'll talk more about it. But just in terms of value, I think I have to put this in the decent. It's not rocking my mind like something the Civivi We Knife, you know, knives are doing, where the knife is just downright amazing at the price point. You know, this knife has a lot of, you know, similar niceties. Not full titanium, but you got some carbon fiber, you got some decent steel and D2. So this is just a shade down in quality and parts, but, you know, it's like half the cost, almost a third the cost of this knife. So it's kind of in a weird spot where, you know, you triple the price. Is it 3 times as good as that knife? I can easily say no, it's not. But still, that doesn't mean it's a bad value. There's definitely steels that are using titanium and S35VN that cost 4 times as much. Like, I don't know, a Sabenza or something like that. So, perspective, you could go either way with this argument. I'm going to put it in the decent. All right, let's talk about the action. I'm going to discuss the action in our OCD, open, close, disengage. We're going to go out of order. We're going to talk about the open. So the shape of the flipper tab is good. I think that this doesn't need to be changed, really. It's low enough in its design that you're not going to be like, you know, bumping into it too much. It's pretty rounded on the edges. It's a good low profile flipper tab with enough edge that you can get on there pretty good. It's not perfect. I'm going to mention why later, but as far as the actual open goes, it's solid. The detent is very snappy, and the blade comes out most of the time. Not all of the time, but that's not really the detent's fault or the actual, you know, pivot's fault. It's bearings. Otherwise, really solid, fun to fidget with knife to open the knife. Now, disengaging, they did a pretty good job. They have the little finger swoop thing here, so it's easy to come in horizontally, get in there, and disengage the blade. It's the tension on the lock bar, and this is a very long lock bar before it gets to the cutout relief. So I like it when knives do that. It just makes it a little bit looser in terms of how easy it is to disengage the knife. And that's definitely the case here. As far as like jumping the detent ball onto the tang of the blade, it is not an issue at all. It's basically on the tang of the blade right away. So I really like that. Again, from the fidget factor, if it's tough to get it disengaged and get the detent ball onto the tang of the blade, it can really ruin the fidget factor fun of having a knife and kind of fiddling around with it. So we're good there. And then the close is buttery smooth. It's one normal jostle. It doesn't even have to be anything too crazy, and it shuts right away. So the overall fidget factor is pretty up there. I don't think it's as stellar as like the Deacon or the Pleroma or anything like that, but I like it a lot. It actually reminds me a lot of the Statera. The Statera has very similar experience as far as how easy it is to open, disengage, and close. This is a little bit easier to open because there's jimping, and I'm kind of giving away a little bit of a spoiler, but let's transition this right into the nitpicks. Number one nitpick I want to talk about is the fact that there's no jimping on the flipper tab. I think that's a big miss because everything else about the action is so amazing that I want to say like 15% of the time you might fall off the flipper tab or just kind of have an awkward open because you're slipping off a little bit. If you practice, you can get it just right, but there's a few times where it always feels like it's going to slip off. It's kind of going to look like this a little bit where it's just really easy to come off. So a little bit of jimping, and I think it would have been perfect. When you're so close yet so far, it's just that one little face plant right at the finish line when you're about to win. That's just kind of a heartbreaker. No jimping on the top of the knife is another nitpick. No, I don't normally need it, but this knife needs something for you to kind of latch onto. There's not, this is a straight line from the handle all the way to the tip of the blade. I mean, it is like, I could put a level on it. It's like perfectly straight. And so it doesn't really have any kind of geometry for you to like go on. Even if I took the jimping away from a PM2 or a Para 3, at least I'm bumping into something. I can grab on to, this part to pull it out and this part to push it in. Like there's some depth to it. This is just like a blank slate. It's just nothing. So I need a little bit of traction on the top of the knife. On the bottom of the knife, you only have this, and that's it. So all of your torque in and out is pretty much in this little finger cutout, and that's it. That's all you've got. There's no jimping down here either, which leads me into my third nitpick. This knife is very slippery. I wouldn't say I don't have chronic sweatiness, but, I have body oils. Like I'm normal in that way, I suppose. And so when I have a normal amount of not dry, not sweaty hands, just normal hands, it's just a little bit slippery for me. It hasn't like fallen out of my hands or anything like that. It's not that bad. It's not like an aluminum. If you have like clean aluminum, it's like a bar of soap. It's a little bit better than that, but not much. And I don't know. It's just one of those practical things. I want to be able to control my knife and feel a little bit more connected to it than I do with this one. So kind of bummed out about that. Next nitpick, and this is pretty nitpicky, but on one side, not both sides, we're looking at the Tonto edge right here. The edge is not even. You can kind of see it's a little bit wider here, a little bit more narrow here. And then if you flip it around, it's not the same on this one. It's a little bit more even on this one. So it's hard for me to argue that it's supposed to be like that because it's not like this. So no matter how you slice it, something went wrong. So not a huge deal. I know this is hard to do. It's a production knife. It's not a custom knife that they're going to make sure to hit that up right. Tiny nitpick on the fit and finish of the knife, but most other areas of the knife are pretty good in the fit and finish area, except for that. Last nitpick, and this is extremely subjective, but just being honest with kind of my feelings on the knife, it's a little boring. I think, you got the little blue ano ring and a really, really aggressive Tonto blade. You've got this fuller, which, I don't know. All of it kind of bores me. And the maybe I'm bored by the fuller. Maybe I'm bored by just the kind of sameness of this, of just like a titanium frame lock flipper. There's a million of those that if you're like looking at the knife and you're like, oh, it's kind of boring, let's just put a fuller on it. Like, that doesn't do that much, because I'm considering the fuller as like a negative. Not everybody does. I'm not, might not even be in the majority. I don't know. I'll sound off in the comments, but this fuller just gets crud in there. It's just deep enough to where you can't really clean it out with your finger all that easy. So you're gonna have to get a Q-tip or something to get junk out of there, or a good rag. So I wanted this knife to be a little bit more exciting, but also not do it by just slapping on the fuller. So, again, a nitpick. It's not the end of the world. Let's go to the terrible. There's nothing really terrible about this knife. It doesn't really bother me in any single way. Like, the action on the knife is definitely the most redeeming thing about it. With the one issue with the no jimping on the flipper tab. If you really like this knife design, if this is like your jam, you're like, I love Tontos and a fuller. Whoa. Well, then I guess you could get like a file and just try to like put some jimps on this sucker if you wanted to really make this your perfect knife. I don't know. I'm not going to be getting one of these knives. It's not really pulling me in that direction. I couldn't find another version of this knife, the titanium version, that had a different blade shape. I might have been interested in that. It kind of reminds me a little bit of the Keen. If you had just like a normal spear point, just the action overall, like, simple design can be good. Somehow, this is a more simple knife, but less boring to me, because it is trying to be simple instead of being afraid of being simple. And there's that weird kind of artistic interpretation of what's going on here. But if this had a version with that kind of blade, I would be much more interested in that. Having said that, I've got a Keen, and so I wouldn't personally buy it because I already have a Keen. I think it's a little bit better overall design-wise, but very similar, titanium frame block with the internal stop pin. So there's some nice things to like about it. Nothing terrible. The conclusion is, I think this is a solid knife, but I think you need to be a fan of Kizer, you need to be a fan of fullers, you need to be a fan of Tontos. Then maybe, this is a good knife. For $169, you're not breaking the bank for most knife nuts. So, it's good. It's fine. I'm not gonna say like it's a hard recommendation. I definitely think you need to just be in love with this knife, and none of my negatives can talk you out of it. Then sure, go for it. But it's definitely not without its problems. So that's my take on the Kizer Begleiter, I guess. I don't know how to say that. Definitely better than the Mini Therium that I reviewed, which kind of soured me to Kizer. So this reinstills a little bit of my faith on the knife, but not completely fixed it. That's for sure. I hope this was helpful to you. I'll see you in my next video. Bye.